What's up out there, guys? Welcome back to Sunset Video, where the tapes were a little dusty, the shelves were a little chaotic, and the Canon film section is starting to look like it was stocked by someone with big ideas and questionable judgment. I think tonight's lineup is really just another great snapshot of why the Canon film's vault is so fun to revisit. We've got a teenage comedy with real emotional sting, an infamous superhero sequel, a grim Bronson revenge flick, a forgotten buddy cop curio, and Tobe Hooper turning a 1950s alien invasion story into a full-on childhood nightmare. So grab your rental card and let's start off with one of Canon's most unexpectedly painful teen movies.
And now let's all get serious.
First up is 1982's The Last American Virgin. In this one, a pizza boy chases girls, parties, and acceptance with his two best friends. But when he falls for Karen and Karen falls for his cooler friend Rick, the movie quickly turns from raunchy teen comedy into straight-up teenage heartbreak. Now, The Last American Virgin is one of those movies that sort of sneaks up on you at first. It looks like exactly what you would expect from an early 80s teen sex comedy with awkward boys, bad plans, pool parties, crushes, rejection, and enough questionable behavior to make the HR department kick the door in. A lot of the comedy in this movie is very much of its era, and some of it has aged about as gracefully as gas station sushi. But then the movie starts to shift, and underneath all the goofy teen chaos, there's a much sadder story about wanting someone who doesn't want you back, and about learning the hard way that being nice doesn't guarantee you the ending that you imagined. I think that's what gives the movie its staying power. The ending is still one of the most talked about gut punches in the teen comedy world. It doesn't give Gary the clean romantic victory. It doesn't soften the blow. It just lets the heartbreak sit there right in the passenger seat while the music and your imagination delivers the emotional damage. So as it should be, the soundtrack is a big part of why the movie feels so locked into its moment. You get songs from The Cars, The Police, Devo, Oingo Boingo, U2, The Human League, and much more, which I think gives the whole thing that perfect early 80s mall radio glow. The movie made about $5.8 million in the States, so it wasn't a giant hit, but it became one of those titles that people remembered because of the ending. It's the kind of movie somebody would recommend with a weird little warning attached, like, just keep watching, you'll see. And for Canon, this was an early reminder that the studio could stumble into something more lasting than pure exploitation, because this starts like a teen party movie and it ends like a Tyson punch to the gut, and that turn is exactly why people still remember it. Now, from teenage heartbreak, we're jumping into something much bigger and somehow even messier, because only Canon films could go from pizza delivery romance to the Man of Steel trying to stop a nuclear war while the budget's pulling a dine and dash on its production.
Effective immediately, I'm going to rid our planet of all nuclear weapons.
Next, we have 1987's Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, starring Christopher Reeve, Gene Hackman, Margot Kidder, Mariel Hemingway, and John Cryer. This fourthquel sees Superman trying to rid the world of nuclear weapons while Lex Luthor answers by creating Nuclear Man. To me, Superman 4 is one of the more fascinating Canon movies because the idea behind it is actually pretty sincere. Reeve, as part of his negotiations, was given limited creative control, and he helped curate a lot of the plot. And I think giving Superman a story about nuclear disarmament was not a bad concept at all. He's not just stopping a bank robbery or punching a villain through a wall. He's trying to take on one of humanity's biggest fears, which is all fine and good. The problem with that is, though, this movie didn't have the size, the polish, or the support system to pull anything close to that off. Instead of a grand superhero epic, it often feels like Superman is trying to save the world with a few recycled sets, some very tired visual effects, and a cape doing its absolute best. That's where the canon factor really kicks in. This is the studio grabbing one of the biggest superhero IPs on Earth and trying to make it work with pure nerve, a reduced budget, and a lot of wishful thinking, and the result is not good in a traditional sense, but it is hard to ignore. Reeves still gives plenty of effort, which makes the whole thing a little bittersweet. Hackman brings back Lex Luthor with his usual confidence, and I think John Cryer adds a strange little dose of comic energy as Luthor's nephew. Then there's Nuclear Man, who is both unforgettable and completely baffling, which is honestly a very Canon Films combination. But in retrospect, the bigger impact was what this movie did to the Superman film series overall. This would be the end of Christopher Reeves' theatrical run as Superman, and the character wouldn't return for a new solo film until Superman Returns in 2006. And sure, Superman 4 is rough, it's overly sincere, and wildly underpowered for what it's trying to accomplish, but as a Canon Films artifact, I think it may be the clearest example of the studio's entire identity. Huge ambition, shaky execution, absolutely no fear for going bigger than it could afford. It would gross about $36.7 million worldwide on a reported $17 million budget, but it crumbled under the weight of word-of-mouth scrutiny and endless spandex jokes. Now, before we jump into a strange buddy cop mashup later in the list, let's leave Metropolis behind for now and head into a much darker corner of the canon universe. There's no capes here, no speeches at the UN, just Charles Bronson, gritty Los Angeles streets, and a sequel that takes its series into much harsher territory.
You believe in Jesus?
Yes, I do.
Well, you're going to meet him.
Stepping into the grimy side of the action genre, we have 1982's Death Wish 2, starring Charles Bronson, Jill Ireland, Vincent Gardenia, and a young Lawrence Fishburne. In this sequel, Paul Kersey is living his life in Los Angeles when another personal tragedy pushes him back into pure street-level vigilante revenge mode. Now, Death Wish 2 is one of the tougher canon movies to talk about because it is important to the studio's history, but it's also a pretty unpleasant watch during long stretches. The original Death Wish from '74 had plenty of controversy to it, but it also had that cold 70s urban anxiety running through it as well. It felt like a movie about grief and fear and a man slowly losing himself while trying to convince himself he was actually taking control. Death Wish 2 is different. It pushes the material much further into exploitation territory. It's meaner, more direct, and much less interested in moral gray areas. Also, by this point, Paul Kersey isn't really slowly becoming a vigilante at all. He's basically a ready-to-go justice machine the minute the movie starts tightening the screws a bit, which is part of why it became such a defining Canon Films title. This is where Charles Bronson really becomes one of the studio's signature action figures in the decade. And I do mean that with respect. Bronson didn't need to overplay anything. He had that card from granite screen presence already where a raised eyebrow could feel like a final warning, so he earns the moniker, and his second outing here showed no softness at all, which is both the reason it has impact and the reason it can be a hard 90 minutes to sit with. The film would make about $16.1 million though, which was enough to prove Paul Kersey still had plenty of box office life. It also helped push the series much deeper into 80s action territory. A fun bit of trivia, the score here was composed by Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, which I think does give the movie an extra jolt of swagger. Death Wish 2 is not subtle, and it's definitely not comfortable. The revenge elements are built to satisfy a certain audience expectation, but the road getting there is grim and heavy-handed. But in Canon Films history, this movie really does matter because it helped kind of define the studio's harder, grimier action identity and turned Bronson into one of its most reliable symbols of blunt force justice. Moving right along, I think we could all use a little lightening of the mood after that one, which is conveniently also in Canon's wheelhouse, because next up is a buddy cop movie starring Robert Carradine and Billy D. Williams, because with Canon Films, the next tape on the shelf always felt like it was chosen by a very confident roulette wheel.
People told us you like to talk when you get high. Are we high enough yet, Bobby?
I'm gonna throw up!
Technically, you'll be throwing down.
We're sticking with the action genre and stepping into 1987 for number 1 with a Bullet, starring Robert Carradine and Billy D. Williams as two Los Angeles detectives working a murder case that delves into corruption, organized crime, and a very 80s mix of shootouts, attitude, and buddy cop chaos. Number 1 with a Bullet might be one of the most only from Canon Films movies in this episode. I mean, on paper, it sounds like a relatively normal 80s buddy cop thriller. Two detectives, a murder case, corruption, organized crime, sunglasses inside, some car chases, some attitude, probably a saxophone off somewhere in the distance. But then you get to the cast, Carradine and Williams. It's not the first pairing most studios would dream up for this type of movie, and at that same time, that's kind of exactly what makes it interesting. Carradine was clearly trying to step away from the image a lot of viewers had from Revenge of the Nerds to try to play something tougher and more reckless, and Billy D. Williams the whole time was just bringing actual movie star cool to the whole thing. He just has that ability to make even basic dialogue feel smoother than it actually is, and whenever he's on screen, the movie immediately gets a little bit more stylish. The main issue is that number 1 with a Bullet never becomes the sharp, punchy buddy cop gem that you want it to be. It has an unusual cast, it has some real 80s texture to it, and just enough canon weirdness to make it stay interesting, but it also feels like it's stuck between crime thriller, action comedy, and TV series pilot. You can almost hear the movie searching for its identity while the bullets are already flying, and the box office for this one was not kind. This movie only made around $410,000 in the States, which means it basically disappeared from theaters the second it went in, and it had to find whatever audience it could through VHS and late night cable curiosities. One interesting behind the scenes note is that Jim Belushi was originally attached as both star and co-writer before leaving the project, with Carradine stepping into the role later. And really, once you know that, the movie I think makes a little bit more sense. You can just feel the ghost of a much better Belushi style wisecracking cop movie floating around in this one. Regardless, this is not a lost classic, but it is the perfect canon curiosity, a movie that just never fully locks in, yet stays watchable because the casting is odd, the tone is unstable, and the whole thing just kind of feels like a relic of 80s experimental filmmaking where studios took shots, whether smart or not. And now for our final tape of the night, we're going to leave the crime-ridden streets of Los Angeles behind and head into full-on childhood nightmare territory with strange hills, nervous adults, alien neck implants, and Tobe Hooper taking a 1950s sci-fi classic and turning the weirdness knobs up to max levels.
Dad? Are you okay, Dad?
Fine.
We're definitely having some fun for this last one tonight. It's 1986's Invaders from Mars, directed by Tobe Hooper. This movie follows a young boy who sees a flying saucer land near his home and realizes the adults around him are slowly being taken over by alien invaders. Now, Invaders from Mars feels like a movie built out of a kid's nightmare. It's a remake of the 1953 film, but Tobe Hooper does not turn it into a slick, modern alien invasion thriller. Instead, he leans into the artificial quality of it. The colors are strange, the sets feel a little unreal, the town looks normal at first, but not quite normal enough, like it was something created from the imagination of a kid. And I think that's what makes the movie so interesting. It's not really grounded paranoia, it's childhood paranoia. It's the fear that something is wrong and that the adults are acting strangely and that nobody is listening to you. So despite the weird subject matter, the themes are relatable. Hunter Carson is great as David, the young boy who sees the invasion before anybody believes him. Karen Black, I think, brings a wonderfully offbeat warmth as the school nurse who starts to trust him, and the rest of the adult cast just gives the movie that uneasy feeling that every grown-up might be either a little bit useless, suspicious, or already taken over, which, depending on your childhood, may feel disturbingly accurate. And as a Canon Films release, Invaders from Mars was ambitious in that wonderfully wobbly Canon way. You can see the effort in the creative work, the sets, and the big finale, but you can just feel the tone bouncing around. Sometimes it's creepy, sometimes it's goofy, sometimes it feels like a Saturday matinee that wandered into the wrong cinema. The movie made about $4.9 million against a $7 million budget, so it was a theatrical misfire, but this is exactly the kind of movie that could survive in the video store era. The box art, the title, the alien promise, the Toby Hooper name, that was enough to get a curious kid to pick it up and wonder if they were making a terrible decision. I mean, it is uneven, but it's exactly the kind of Canon movie that sticks in your head. Too strange to be polished, too specific to be disposable, and built like a kid's bad dream that somehow made it onto the video store shelf. And that's a wrap on episode 4 of our Canon Films Shelf Dive. We did teenage heartbreak, saw a superhero collapse, dispensed vigilante revenge, played with buddy cop confusion, and dove headfirst into alien invasion paranoia, which honestly feels like a pretty damn good Canon Films marathon. And I think that's why these movies are still fun to revisit, not because they're all masterpieces, they are very much not, but I mean, even the misfires usually have something going on, a strange casting choice, a wild concept, a sincere idea trapped inside of a cheap production, or a movie star trying to hold the whole thing together with pure screen presence and a stern expression. Good or bad, movies that came from Canon Films rarely felt anonymous. They always felt like somebody made a big bet and maybe lost track of the chips and just kept filming anyways, and that is a big part of why they still matter, because even when they failed in ways that still had their own personality. As always, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me here at Sunset Video. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, drop it a like, leave me a comment so we can continue the conversation. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next video. Until then, be kind, rewind, and always remember, movies never say die.
Jack Burton and the Pork Chop Express, and I'm talking to whoever's listening out there.
Survive a war, you gotta become war.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
You trying to say Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?